Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to what is actually the quarter century of Cuppa clubs at Ethex. So that's amazing. We've had that number of organisations come through and list on the platform and chat to the audience. Today we're talking to Heart of England Community Energy and Bristol Energy Cooperative. We've got John Stott, who's a director of Heart of England Community Energy, and Jake Berniat from Communities for Renewables, who provide asset manager services to Heart of England. And we've also got Andy O'Brien, who's director of Bristol Energy Cooperative. My name's Josh Brewer. I'm the senior business development manager here at Ethex. So as you say, we'll be talking to John and Jake from Heart. They're currently issuing a bond through Ethex to refinance some of the junior debt for their solar farm. The farm which produces enough clean energy to power 4,500 homes per year, as well as generating funds for local community support. And we'll also be talking to Andy from Beck. Now, they've been running numerous clean community-owned energy projects over the years, about 10 years in total. I think they've been doing that. Currently generating enough green energy to power 3,000 homes in the Bristol area, and they're currently running a community shares issue through Ethex. So we'll just go on to a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So the aim of this session is to learn a bit more about Heart of England Community Energy and Bristol Energy Cooperative, particularly their positive impact. It's important to say it's not a financial promotion. We can't answer any questions about individual financial circumstances. What we do is we have a chat function. It'd be great if people could just pop any questions they might have in there, and then we'll just try and work them into the conversation. If there isn't time to answer all the questions, we'll try and follow up after the event. And just to say that we are recording the session, we'll be uploading it to YouTube and our website, so you can watch it again or share it. We'll send a follow-up email with links to any resources that we might talk about as well. As I say, the session should be about 45 minutes. But then first off, I'm just going to say hello to Andy. Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Jake.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, John.
Hi, everyone.
Good. And I think we'll just start off, if we could just get a bit of an overview from Jake and John on Heart of England Community Energy and what you do and why you do it.
Yes, thanks, Josh. So, hello, everyone. My name's John Stott. I'm chair of Heart of England Community Energy. And our purpose is in the name, community energy. So we use our part of the money we make from the electricity we generate to fund local organisations that are helping the community, and particularly the parts of the community that are in difficulty. So people in fuel poverty, and another group which is people who are in hardship. And we do that by engaging with local organisations that specialise in these sorts of things. So we have funded an extra employee at Acton Energy, which is a local charity that helps people in fuel poverty. And they ran a Heat for Health programme where they tried to use, where this extra employee was tasked with finding people in fuel poverty and providing them with help. So our money funds the help, but it doesn't fund the boiler upgrades or insulation and things like that. But Acton Energy have a lot of expertise in getting those funds in. The difficulty is making sure they go to the right people. So that's where some of our community benefit is targeted. It's getting to the right people. And similarly with Citizens Advice South Warwickshire, that they run a hardship fund. We discovered that so hardship will be people who have no savings and the fridge is broken, so they don't have a fridge, or they haven't got money to buy a school uniform for their children, that sort of thing. And we learned from them that the constraint was not the money to provide the help, but it was the administration of that money. So we paid for an extra day a week for their administrator, so that more hardships could be administered, and that's been quite successful. We also did for a while fund Harbury e-Wheels, who run electric cars, in order to take people in rural isolation to dental appointments and doctor's appointments. It was kind of a taxi service that was free, and they also collected food from the supermarkets and took it to the local food bank. But we discovered in the year after that we'd funded them that it had been very successful in fundraising. So we parked that one for a while, because basically they've got enough money to function. So we try to direct our funds where it's most needed. And then we also put a small amount of money each year to a charity called Solar Aid, which provides solar lighting systems for families in Africa. And the reason we do that is that per pound spent, the number of people who benefit and the nature of the benefits are absolutely staggering. It provides health benefits because the families stop burning kerosene for light. It gives a better quality of light so the children can study, so their education benefits. And I can remember there was one example where people were then able to charge up their mobile phones rather than having to drive many miles to do it. And there was a man who was a taxi driver, and this was a significant drain on his business, having to drive a long way to charge up his mobile phone so he could get custom. So we like that kind of help, try target it where it's most needed. Our solar farms, we have 3 of them, each just under 5 megawatts. They're located just west of Stratford. They were built in 2016 by a company called Ethex, and then they were moved into community ownership, and that was sort of the birth of Heart of England Community Energy. Local directors were recruited. They all live in and around Stratford, apart from one who lives in Coventry, but we don't hold that against him. As has already been hinted, Communities for Renewables provide our asset management service. So the board of directors effectively oversee what they're doing, and we have quarterly board meetings where they report back all the information that we need to look at. And directors from time to time visit the solar farms just to sort of see it for real. And that's in addition to the annual inspection by CFR. In the past, the initial funding was by a series of bank loans and loans from social and sustainable capital, which have gradually been replaced, and also by local shareholders, of which I and the other directors are, and quite a few other people, and some bondholders. But we need to sort of complete the refinance of these initial loans, and our current bond offer is aiming to do that. The idea is to replace expensive money with slightly cheaper money, and that kind of puts us in a stronger financial position. So I think that gives a picture of Heart of England, and maybe Jake would like to take over now and say a bit more about the bond offer.
Thanks, John. So I'm Jake from a company called Communities for Renewables, or CFR. We're a not-for-profit company that provide company and asset management services to Heart of England Community Energy and 6 other community energy enterprises around England, who between them own 50 megawatts of community solar. And we do all the behind the scenes work, monitoring the solar farm, managing the operations contractors, doing the accounts, bookkeeping, and reporting to the board. And in addition to that role with Heart of England, we have prepared the 2021 solar bond offer, working with Bates Wells solicitors, who did the legal review, Westerly Accounting, who did the financial projections, and obviously Ethex, who are the promoter and receiving agent and are the long-term share and bond registrar for Heart of England Community Energy. So the purpose of the offer, as John said, is to complete the long-term financing of the enterprise, to repay some shorter-term, more expensive debt from social and sustainable capital. The target returns on the offer are an annual interest payment of 4%, with capital repaid over 15 years, and the offer document sets out an intended capital repayment profile. The target is 1.1 million. We are just over halfway towards meeting that target. 340,000 of that 1.1 million, so we've already raised this, is being used to repay the 2018 bondholders who are being paid at an interest rate of 5%, and the rest is being used to repay the remaining short-term SASC debt. The 3 solar farms benefit from, 2 of them benefit from a feed-in tariff, which gives them a fit for each unit generated, but also a minimum value for the power exported. We've taken advantage of the current high prices out our purchase agreements for all 3 solar farms out to 2024, which are generating a significant income upside. And the December inflation rate has just been announced at 7.5%, and we're expecting the feed-in tariff and the minimum export rate to go up by that 7.5% in March, which will provide an upside to the base case economics presented in the offer. The risks to be aware of, as is normal, returns aren't guaranteed, capital is at risk. It is a long-term investment. The bonds will be on the Ethex secondary market platform, but it means you can only sell your bonds if Ethex can line up another buyer. So investors need to be prepared to be in there for the long term. The bonds are unsecured and they are subordinate to the Triodos and SASC debt, as are the existing share and bond holders who have been paid their target returns to date. The returns are subject to forecast cash flows, but so far things have gone well, and the solar generation is about 3.5% up on the long-term projections to date, and the revenue per unit is also significantly above long-term projections because of the current high energy prices and high inflation, which are a challenge to many people. But if you're a generator, it's the opposite. And the purpose of Heart of England is to take that financial upside and recycle it back into people in the community who are struggling because of the same reasons. Thanks.
Thanks, Jake. And thanks, John. And just Jake, just to clarify, in terms of the repayment on the bond, that's paid out of revenues. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah. So once we've completed this bond offer, there is no need for any more refinances. The repayment of all the capital, bank loans, SASC loans, share and bond offers, will come out of future forecast cash flows.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Well,
thanks. Just the last point is, because of this potential 7% upside coming in March, we may need to end the offer early, because if we end up not needing that capital because of a revenue upside, the offer may get cut short. But we haven't made that decision yet.
Okay. Thanks for the overview there, John and Jake. It's really useful to get a sort of clearer sort of bird's eye view of the organisation and the impact particularly, which is really powerful. Andy, turn to you just to talk a bit about Bristol Energy Corp.
Okay. Yes. Hi, everybody. So my name's Andy O'Brien. I'm a co-founder and director of Bristol Energy Cooperative. So we exist in the very same way that Heart of England Community Energy exists. We're here to provide a benefit to the community. So we set up back in 2011. We were all volunteers at the time, and we just wanted to make a difference. We wanted to actually proactively get involved in generating local renewable energy, and we knew to do that we actually needed to raise some funds. So that's what we started doing. We worked with the Co-ops UK, who helped us set up as a co-op. And at that time, there were a number of other co-ops close to us. There's Bath and West Community Energy, who were also running share offers. So we started to do the same thing. And our first share offer back then was for £88,000, which felt like a huge amount of money. And we had no idea where it was going to go, whether it'd be successful or not. But we over-raised, we got more money than we needed, and that allowed us to actually install on 3 solar roofs rather than two solar roofs we're planning to do. So since then, we've grown quite a bit. I am now fully employed by the co-op. We've got five paid staff members. We've got a share offer out at the moment with Ethex. We've done a good number with them now. This is actually our 8th share offer that we've run in total. We've done bond offers as well in the past. And we also do have commercial loans on our solar farms as well. But in total, we've raised about £14 million since we started. And about half of that's come from the community, through the community share offers and bond offers. So assets-wise, we've got 2 solar farms, both about 5 megawatts capacity. We've got 13 rooftop schemes, and we've also got a battery storage scheme. So that's what we've got at the moment. And then in development, what we did last year with Ethex, we ran another share offer that was for £2 million that was successful. We're using those funds primarily for 2 things. One is a hydro scheme in Bristol, which has also got the last dregs of EU funding. And we're literally looking to go out to tender for that hydro scheme in the next month, after many, many years of development. And also the other thing we raised the money for in the last share offer was for a microgrid, which is something we're very excited about. This is really quite innovative stuff. So basically, this is on a new build housing site in Bristol, where there are no gas boilers on site. It's all no fossil fuel. So basically, the buildings have very, very good energy efficiency on site. There are renewables on every roof, so there's PV on every roof. Heat pumps provide the heating and the hot water, and there's battery storage and EV charging on site. But rather than use a battery in each individual house, there's actually one big battery on site, and that uses smart software and systems to actually aggregate the solar from all the rooms, so that solar can be shared across the different buildings. And if there's an excess of solar being generated at any one time, the battery can store that for later, can also export it to the grid. And then if there are times, say in the middle of winter, where actually the panels aren't generating as much as the residents need in total, then at that stage, the battery can actually draw from the national grid and then use that on site when needed. So the individual bits of technology in themselves aren't new, but putting them all together in a fully functioning microgrid on a domestic housing site, this is pretty much a UK first. So we raised the funds for that first microgrid last year, and really pleased to announce that actually now some of those houses are actually live, are actually drawing from the grid, from the microgrid. And our Metro Mayor came to visit last week. So it's fantastic to actually, I mean, with these share offers, I mean, Jake will attest this as well. We spend huge amounts of time doing what seems like very, very boring stuff. And often these projects take years and years and years to develop, and we're heads and emails and spreadsheets. But it's just so nice to actually see that, last year we were raising money for something, and now it's actually built out, and the residents are beginning to move into those houses. And that's what it's all about for us. It's making things happen. It's working with other people in collaboration. And yeah, the way we do that, we have to get some money in to actually make those projects work. So yeah, we raise funds. But people are investing very much for a social and environmental reason as much as a financial one. And, you know, as I said, we are actually a community benefit society. So since we've started, we've channeled over £300,000 of revenue from our schemes into community benefits in lots of different ways. Probably easier if I send a link through to Ethex, just to our website where you can see the different sorts of things we do. But it's a wide range, and yeah, that's really crucial for us.
Yeah.
So at the moment, yes, we've got another share offer on Ethex. This time it's for 1 million. Very similar to last time in terms of we're projecting an annual return of 3.5%, and it's for portfolio schemes as it was last year. But the two that we're featuring this time around is one is quite a large rooftop solar scheme in Bristol, on the building which is called the Bristol Beacon. Changed its name quite recently. If you do know Bristol, it used to be Colston Hall, and it's been undergoing a major refurbishment over the last couple of years, both building wise, but also changing the whole focus of what the organization. It's actually Bristol Music Trust who's based in the building, and we're going to be actually doing that rooftop installation, which allows them to spend their funds on other things. And then the second project in the share offer is another microgrid site. This time it's in Bridport in Dorset, slightly bigger than the one we're doing in Bristol. And it's only about 6 months behind in development. So again, the houses are mainly up. There is solar on the roofs. The battery has arrived in the country. It's in storage, waiting to go on site. And yeah, it'll be great to work with the community there. It's a co-housing scheme, and it's very much partner based. There's a number of partners involved in the co-housing element, and there's a housing association involved. So it's providing houses for people who really need it, but also fantastic that these are going to be pretty much net zero houses. Have I missed anything off? Oh, we've got over 1,200 members now, which is fantastic, because without our members we are nothing really. And there are lots of ways that our members can get involved. They obviously vote at AGMs, they can stand as a director, they can join our working groups, and some of our members do a huge amount in their day job in this sector, and it's just fantastic to see the breadth of activity and ambition and knowledge and desire to get us to a zero carbon future. And really proud that they are members of our co-op.
No, thanks for that, Andy. And I think what's really good is to see that after a bit of a hiatus in developments coming out of community energy organisations, that there are now new business models starting to emerge and opportunities to push on and develop and keep pushing the envelope. So that's great. So we've had a couple of questions start coming in. People seem interested in batteries. So I'll just pass this one, maybe if I pass this one to you first, Andy. Discuss the likely improvements in battery technology over the next 5 years and what impact that's going to have on community energy. And then after Andy, I'll get your thoughts on that, maybe Jake as well, as someone who's on the sort of more developer side.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very fast-moving area. I mean, the batteries we're installing at the moment are fairly short duration batteries, which probably run for 2 hours maximum until they're probably discharged. But what the whole sector as well is very interested in is the longer duration batteries, which are there now already. In terms of having, say, a trading contract with the say the national grid, then those contracts aren't in place yet for longer duration batteries, but they will be very soon. And those are going to be very game changing. And also the different types of battery materials that are being used, and that's changing as well. Tesla, for example, are moving from lithium ion to lithium ion, and so lots of other similar technologies being developed. So it's moving at a very, very, very fast speed now.
Jake, what are your thoughts on the sort of like, I suppose, the impact on community energy more generally of the development of battery technology?
Well, actually, the three Heart of England solar farms each host a 1 megawatt battery system that shares the solar farm grid connection with no impact. It doesn't have a constraint on what the solar farm can export to the grid. But those batteries installed back in 2016 were part of the first wave of megawatt scale grid connected batteries installed. They're not owned by Heart of England, they're owned by a commercial battery company called Zenobē. But Heart of England receives a lease for each battery. I guess what we've seen developing new projects is we have looked at the feasibility of megawatt scale, i.e. 1 megawatt capacity, 2 megawatt hours storage on a number of small to medium scale community solar projects, and the business case hasn't been quite there yet for those. And what's happening in the national battery market, there is no doubt batteries are getting built, and the UK system needs a lot more batteries, but they're getting built at a very large scale, 10, 50, hundreds of megawatts. So the question is that something community energy enterprises will get into? The business model for battery storage is much more complicated and uncertain than the simple business model of generating electricity, particularly when there was feed-in tariffs and renewables obligation subsidies around, or perhaps the replacement we're looking at now is long-term fixed price power purchase contracts with local electricity consumers. So I think it's still yet to be seen what role large-scale batteries play. I think there is a really interesting model for smaller scale batteries in projects like Bristol Energy's Microgrid, where you've got a much smaller battery system that has a specific role maximizing on-site consumption from solar panels within a microgrid or solar panels on a community building. That's quite a different model to megawatt scale grid connected batteries that are there to balance the UK energy system.
Okay, thanks, Jake. So there's a few kind of questions coming in on microgrids. I'll just try and bundle those up a little bit. So what's the kind of average, what's the sort of size of these microgrid projects that you're looking at? Do the householders have a choice of energy supplier, or do they just have to take the energy from the battery? And then are these public-private developments? So maybe Andy, if I put those across to you.
Yeah, so the scheme in Bristol, that's Water Lilies, that's 30, I think it's 30 odd houses. The one in Dorset is slightly larger. I think it's getting on for 50 houses.
It's 53.
You may need to check our share offer document for the exact numbers. I mean, if I take the example, say the Bristol one, so basically it's a typical situation. It's a commercial housing developer who's building them, but it's a very forward-thinking housing developer who had done some very sustainable developments already in Bristol and was looking to do a larger site, and was willing to work with us and a company called Clean Energy Prospector, who they're based in Bristol, and we've worked with them very closely actually for a number of years. They actually provide quite a lot of this of the metering and data stuff for our rooftop solar schemes, and they are the technical brains behind the microgrid side of it. And so the housing developer was forward thinking enough to almost like take the risk of adding this level of complexity to a housing development, which in itself has complications. But you can see why they wouldn't necessarily want to take on more financial costs in buying a battery or whatever. So that's where we came in terms of, that's I suppose our expertise in raising funds for community energy installations. And so that's how it's worked there. So it's been like almost like a three-way partnership between the housing developer, us as a fundraiser, and then Clean Energy Prospector, who are the technical experts behind it. And at Bridport, it's similar but different. Again, it's being built out by a commercial housing developer, but the clients are, there's sort of two, there's Bridport Co-Housing, who will be the actual, they're the people who've been planning this co-housing scheme for a long time, but also there's Bournemouth Churches Housing Association, which are involved as well. And in this one, we weren't initially going to be involved, but they wanted, it was going to be the local community who were going to fund it initially, similar to, say, that has been done at Bristol, but they wanted to get initial sort of a loan funding first and then move over to a community offer later on down the line. But they struggled in the end to get the initial loan funding because companies had changed hands. So they needed to move quickly. So we offered to step in. And so we are, I suppose, almost equivalent of social and sustainable capital on this one. We're providing the funding, but we are giving the community themselves the opportunity to buy out the whole scheme. If a few years down the line, if it's proved to wash its face financially and everyone's happy with it, they will actually have the opportunity to buy it themselves. And it will, like the Residents Association will own the community microgrid.
Andy, just conscious there's a few questions coming in as well. So John, I want to put one to you. Is that just the importance of locality in terms of heart of England, and I guess this is in two ways. One in terms of where the benefits accrue, but also in terms of your investor base, because you know you go through a platform like Ethex and you are likely to get investors who are not necessarily from the area, but more broadly because they care about community energy. And I guess how that works for you guys at Heart of England.
Yeah, so well, as I mentioned earlier, all the directors are local, and I should have mentioned that they're volunteer directors. We don't get paid. They all own shares in Heart of England, so they get a return on their investment. So what was the rest of the question, Josh? Just
well, it's just the fact that you will have investors that are from outside of your local area. Yes. And so how do you sort of square that, I suppose?
Well, we accept it and we're grateful for them, really. I mean, it's due to Ethex's ability to contact a wide potential investor base. That's why we've come to you. That happened in the past with another organisation that got our first shareholders and bondholders. We do focus the community benefit. Our actual policy is South Warwickshire and nearby areas. That last phrase being because the solar farm is quite close to the edge of South Warwickshire. And if, for example, we encountered a good cause in Redditch, which is not that many miles from the solar farm, we wouldn't want to exclude them because they're basically on our doorstep. But apart from the money that goes to solar aid, all the community benefit is within South Warwickshire at the moment.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And there's a kind of quite a general question that's come in, which is naming 3 initiatives that government could announce now, which could benefit the energy sector. Jake, I might put that onto you first, and then onto you, Andy, afterwards.
3 initiatives. Okay, so a community feed-in tariff, or in the absence of that, it's a community contracts for difference that would guarantee a minimum price for the energy generated would be highly beneficial, both to the projects but also to the national consumer, because wind and solar is generating power at way lower than gas and coal does, half the price of what nuclear is guaranteed. So to guarantee new wind and solar generation at a minimum price doesn't cost the consumer any money relative to those technologies, but it does provide us with the long-term income certainty needed to raise finance. And in the absence of that, what we're doing with new projects is trying to sign long-term power purchase agreements with local councils, public sector bodies. So if the government isn't going to provide a long-term kind of minimum offtake price, the other thing they could do is commit the public sector to buying their power from local community-owned generation through long-term fixed-price PPAs. On the kind of development side, there is actually a very good fund around at the moment called the Rural Community Energy Fund that supports the development costs for new projects. It's coming to an end, and we need a replacement for that, which also covers urban projects. It doesn't make sense that you can get funding for a rural project but not an urban project. And I'm going to go for they need to bring back a planning environment where communities can build their own wind turbines. That in Scotland and Wales you still can, but since 2015 in England you can't, with a couple of exceptions, one of which is near Andy.
Thanks, Jake. And Andy, what are your views on that?
Yeah, very similar to Jake there. What I was also say is what we're really pushing for. I mean, the Rural Community Energy Fund does cover some of this, but what the sector needs is risk funding money, or also resource money to actually employ staff, because these schemes take such a long time to develop, and often they're being done by volunteers, which slows down the whole process. If the government was to make funding available so that right across the country in each locality, say one person could be employed in every ward of the country to be working on community energy, then that would have a transformative effect, because the support infrastructure, say from Community Energy England and groups like ourselves, existing groups, is there. The finance is there, the technology is there, it all just needs bringing together. And if you look on the Community Energy England website, in fact, they issued a press release just the other day saying, look, come on, government, you keep saying in these white papers that you support community energy, but you're not actually providing anything. You're not sticking to the promises. And they could do it so easily by just shifting what will be really quite small amounts of money to the right places. So that's one thing I'd really like to see. And the other thing is, we need to go back to the situation where there's a big scheme being developed, so like a 50 megawatt solar farm, then those developers should be required to provide an element of community ownership to the local community. We used to have that, and that's the way we got our solar farms, and Heart of England got their solar farms. It was through this scheme where a developer developing a 10 megawatt scheme had to cut it in half and give half to the community. That doesn't exist anymore. The FITs have gone, but you've got in Wales, I think there is a commitment. Each scheme has to have, say, 10% community ownership. In England, there's nothing at all. So we're on the back foot trying to convince developers locally to let us have a part of a big scheme, but they can just basically say no. There's no comeback if they just say no. So that's something that does need to change.
Okay. Yep. Thanks for that. And so, it's a general question. With inflation rising and bonds sort of share offer returns falling recently, does this put community renewable investment schemes, does it make them less competitive? And I think, John, I'll pass that one to you to start with.
Yeah, well, it's in the days when we had really low inflation, investors would be attracted to the rates that were available on Ethex, and rates have dropped a bit in recent years, and still investors have kept coming. I think we just need to see what happens since inflation's rising. They're a different sort of investment. Still a lot better than you can get in a building society. I've just had a look for a follow-on ISA that I've got, and 1.5 4% is what I found. So what's on offer at the moment is still a lot better than that.
Yes, yeah, and I think you know, the other key thing, and I think you touched on this, Andy, is that these are, you know, these are social investments as well, that the people are thinking about the impact as part of that investment. But I guess also, I mean, certainly if you think about Heart, you've moved from a position of, you know, in a development phase, which is obviously riskier, and now you're in a much more kind of clearer phase as to what the long-term finances look like for the organization, and so you can create a product that you know that works alongside that and gives a bit of all sorts of long-term stability, I think.
Yeah, if I can sort of add a bit to that, we have been focused to some extent in reorganizing our financial structure, but once this bond offer is completed, we can turn our energies as a board more into further development. And we have already been keeping an eye out for opportunities. We've followed up one or two, but none of them have come to anything. And also maybe finding new ways of helping the community. You know, we can devote more time to that. So that's how I see the future of Heart of England. Thanks,
John. And another question has come in, which I suppose is looking about future developments. I think, Jake, you kind of touched on this, talking about it'd be great in England to get onshore wind back up and going again, because it's absolutely been killed dead by the planning changes. But then there's a question here about, are we seeing any kind of like hydrogen focused projects, or AD, which is that anaerobic digestion projects as well? Andy, you as someone who's, you know, Bristol's always looking around to sort of innovate. What are you seeing in that kind of space?
Hydrogen, we're not doing anything at the moment. I think it needs to be, it's been done at a much larger scale at the moment. And so I think for an individual co-op to actually try and do something would be quite hard. Especially, you know, you talk about maybe fuel cells in a particular vehicle, but even there, it's still too cutting edge in terms of technology and finance, and an unknown financial model, I think, for community groups to get involved. Anaerobic digestion. Again, it's quite hard for a community to do it, or anyone to do it, because you need to have that guaranteed feedstock. I know Ecotricity just about to roll out sort of green AD grass, as they're calling it, grass mills, I think, which is basically anaerobic digestion. So, yeah, it can be done, but it's quite difficult, because you just do need to have that security that there is going to be stuff that you can actually put into the system on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. And Jake, what you sort of seeing is, you know, what are there the new models developing, or is it around new technologies, or is it the kind of the traditional technologies of wind and solar, but just in, you know, tweaks to those business models?
The main, yeah, to be honest, the main thing we're working on at the moment is new community solar and wind projects under a subsidy-free business model, which at the moment, as I said before, means trying to find a long-term purchaser for the power. I think hydrogen is interesting. I think solar farms directly charge, or wind turbines directly charging EV charge points is really interesting. So hopefully we'll see more innovation projects like that in the future. But I always think the starting point for any local energy enterprise is to get enough generation under its belt that the core costs of the enterprise are covered, and it's a financially strong position, and then it can look at innovative business models from there, which is where Bristol started out, is where Heart of England is. So you've got to be at a certain scale for it to work, and then you can start seeking to grow your enterprise and your impact.
Thanks, Jake. Just very quickly, thanks, Jake. Thanks for your answer on the 15-year bonds. So yes, they are transferable. They can be bought and sold through the Ethex secondary market, but it is dependent on there being an available buyer for that bond. In terms of non-transferable shares, when you die, they go into probate, and those shares would be bought back from the estate by the organisation. Is the normal way in which that would take place. Well, I guess, I mean, just looking at time, we are pretty much there. I guess I'd just like to finish off very quickly, what's going to be community energy going to look like in 10 years' time? John, I'll start with you.
Well, I think that's a really tough one, Josh.
You've got 20 seconds. No.
I think the cost of hardware is coming down, so that the possibility of subsidy-free community energy becomes stronger. So that's the one to watch. And things that rely on sun and wind rather than AD fuel stocks.
Yep. Andy?
I think it could be huge, but we've got to get these levers pulled that we all keep talking about. I mean, back in 2018, we actually have been, well, since I've been leading on something called Zero West, which is bringing together the community sector, the commercial sector, and the 4 local authorities in the West of England region, and saying, come on, we need to work more closely together if we're really going to accelerate the region to zero carbon. And when you do bring people together in a room, all sorts of interesting things happen, and it's not always about finance. Some people have got resource, some people have got staff, some people have got assets that they can't use but somebody else could. And when you start sharing that information, then initiatives start to come out of that. And we're working quite closely with our fairly new Metro Mayor at the moment, and he's very supportive. And we're talking to him about, well, how can you draw down from national government to help us, and how can we help put your message across to national government? So, for example, at the moment, there's a £50 million green recovery fund that's just been agreed for the West of England Combined Authority. So he was actually asking us the other day, how do you think we should spend that? So we're putting questions or giving some advice on that. But if we can all work together, and if we can get a supportive government that actually helps have the correct national policy, it all feeds down to local level, and the local authorities can join in as well. And if it's correctly set up, then obviously the commercial funding comes in, because the commercial funds are looking for somewhere to invest anyway. It's just a question of where they put it. And everybody knows it's beginning to move into renewables and into ESG so much more, but we just need to accelerate it at a huge rate. And it could be huge, but if we keep plodding on the way we are with failed initiatives that aren't being done in a proper systematic fashion, then we may not get anywhere near where we want to be in 10 years' time.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Andy. And just lastly, Jake, it's your quick.
Well, if you look at the transition we've got to go through in the next 10 years, the electricity system has to go completely renewable quite quickly. The transport system has to go completely electric quite quickly. Yeah. The heat system has to go probably largely electric, and we have to retrofit all our homes. And it will probably happen. It's happening a bit late. It can either happen under a repetition of the current energy system where the bulk of the economic value leaves the local economy, or it can happen under an energy system where the bulk of the economic value is retained within the local economy and is a positive multiplier rather than a drain. And that's what local and national government needs to see, that the potential is there for a Green New Deal, Build Back Better, whatever you want to call it, but you need to put a localness at the heart of the energy transition.
Thanks for that, Jake. And yeah, that's a good point to end on there. I think put that idea of community at the heart of the just transition. So listen, thanks everyone for that. That was really informative, really useful. Thanks for all the questions from the crowd. So we had a good engagement there, which is great. So thanks, Jake, John, Andy. Thanks to everyone who joined us. This has been recorded, the webinar, so you can watch it again on the website or pass it on to someone as well if you want to. And we will send out an email with some links to resources just as a follow-up too. But just remains to say thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.